There is a place on earth where the jungle breathes through the mouths of stone gods, where roots as thick as cathedral columns have spent 800 years slowly prying apart the walls of temples that took 50 years to build, where the faces of divine kings stare out from towers in every direction, north, south, east, west, their stone lips curved into a smile that is not quite compassion, not quite indifference, but something older than either. This place is Angkor. And if you have seen photographs of it, the iconic silhouette of 5 lotus bud towers reflected in a rectangular moat at dawn, the endless corridors of bas-relief carvings depicting wars and heavens and churning cosmic oceans, if you have seen even one image, then you already know something that most people who've navigable rivers leading to the sea, without any of the obvious geographic advantages that explain why great civilizations rise where they do. And yet, Angkor was, at its peak in the 12th and 13th centuries, the largest pre-industrial city on Earth. Not one of the largest, the largest, period. Its urban footprint, and we know this now from laser scanning technology called LiDAR that can see through the jungle canopy to the ground beneath, its urban footprint stretched across roughly 1,000 square kilometers. For comparison, medieval Paris occupied about 8, London perhaps 6. Angkor was not a city in the way we imagine ancient cities, a dense cluster of buildings behind walls. It was something stranger and in many ways more modern. It was a vast, low-density urban sprawl, a dispersed metropolitan landscape of temples, reservoirs, canals, rice paddies, neighborhoods, and roads, all organized around a hydraulic infrastructure so precise and so extensive that engineers who study it today still shake their heads. The Khmer did not just build temples, they engineered water. And in that engineering, in the audacious, almost insane ambition to control the monsoon itself, lies both the secret of their extraordinary power and the seed of their eventual collapse. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us begin where the stones begin, with the hands that shaped them. We do not know his name. We will never know his name, because the Khmer inscriptions that survive, and there are over 1,000 of them, carved in Sanskrit and Old Khmer on temple doorframes and freestanding stelae, record the names of kings, the names of gods, the quantities of rice and workers and gold donated to temples.
They record priests, generals, ministers. They do not record stone carvers. So let us call him what he was, a mason, a sculptor, one of the tens of thousands of artisans who spent their lives turning sandstone into scripture. He was born, let us say, around 1110 in the Common Era, in a village on the northern shore of the West Baray, the great western reservoir of Angkor. The West Baray was not a natural lake. It was an artificial basin, 8 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, built by the labor of thousands under King Suryavarman I, roughly a century earlier. It held over 50 million cubic meters of water. From the edge of his village, looking south, the boy who would become our mason would have seen what looked like an inland sea, its surface broken only by the small temple island at its center, dedicated to Vishnu, shimmering in the heat. Water was everything. This is the first thing to understand about the Khmer. Before the gods carved into every available surface, water. The Tonle Sap, the Great Lake, hydrological features on Earth. During the dry season, it is a modest lake, perhaps 2,500 square kilometers. But during the monsoon, something happens that occurs nowhere else on this scale. The Mekong River, swollen with Himalayan snowmelt and monsoon rain, backs up. The flow of the Tonle Sap River, which normally drains the lake into the Mekong, reverses. Water floods backward into the lake, and the Tonle Sap swells to 5 or 6 times its dry season size, up to 16,000 square kilometers. The floodplain becomes a vast, nutrient-rich shallow sea. Fish breed in staggering quantities. The retreating waters leave behind silt-enriched soil, perfect for rice cultivation. This annual pulse, this breathing of the landscape, was the heartbeat of the Khmer world. But a heartbeat is not yet a civilization. A heartbeat is raw potential. What the Khmer did, what made them extraordinary, was build a system to capture, store, regulate, and distribute that water with a precision that no other pre-modern tropical civilization achieved. The barrays, the massive rectangular reservoirs, were the most visible component. The East Barray, built in the late 9th century, these were not simply storage tanks. They were integrated into a network of canals, channels, dikes, and smaller reservoirs called trepyang that distributed water across the agricultural landscape. Rice paddies could be flooded and drained with control. Multiple harvests per year became possible. And that surplus, that extraordinary engineered surplus of rice, fed a population that some scholars estimate at 750,000 or even 1 million people in the greater Angkor region. 1 million people.
In the 12th century, sustained by rice and fish and an infrastructure invisible to anyone who was not looking for it, our mason's father was a rice farmer. His father's father was a rice farmer. They worked land that belonged technically to a temple, which is to say, to the god housed in that temple, which is to say, to the king who had built that temple and donated the land and its people to the deity as an act of merit. The Khmer economy was, at its base, a temple economy. Land, labor, and rice flowed towards temples the way water flowed through canals, by design, by gravity, by the architecture of power. The boy showed an aptitude, perhaps are almost entirely invisible in the historical record. By his late teens, he was in Angkor itself, apprenticed to a workshop attached to the greatest construction project the world had ever seen. Angkor Wat was rising. King Surya Varman II came to power around 1113, possibly through violence, possibly through a contested succession. The inscriptions are diplomatically vague. What is not vague is his ambition. He was a devotee of Vishnu, unusual in a court that had traditionally favored Shiva, and he set out to build a temple that would serve simultaneously as his state temple, his mortuary monument, and a literal model of the Hindu cosmos rendered in stone. The result was Angkor Wat. We need to pause here, because Angkor Wat has become so famous, so reproduced on Cambodian flags and tourist brochures and Instagram feeds, that it is easy to lose the capacity for astonishment. So let us try to recover it. Angkor Wat is the largest religious monument ever constructed by human beings. Its outer enclosure measures approximately 1.5 kilometers by 1.3 kilometers. Its moat is 190 meters wide. The central tower rises 65 meters above the ground. The temple is surrounded by a gallery whose walls are covered in bas-relief carvings that extend, in total, for approximately 800 meters. 800 meters of continuous carved narrative, battles, mythological scenes, heavens, hells, the churning of the ocean of milk, with thousands of individual figures, each rendered with anatomical precision and flowing grace.
The entire structure is oriented to the west, which is unusual. Most Khmer temples face east. This western orientation has been interpreted as funerary, west being the direction of death in Hindu cosmology, which supports the theory that Angkor Wat was designed as Surya Varman's mortuary temple, the place where his spirit would merge with Vishnu after death. But the building is also an astronomical instrument.
At the spring equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower when viewed from the western causeway. The dimensions of the temple encode cosmological numbers. The distances between architectural elements correspond to cycles of Hindu time, yugas, the great ages of the world. The temple is not a building, it is a diagram, a three-dimensional mandala, a bridge between the human and the divine, rendered in 5 million tons of sandstone. 5 million tons. The sandstone was quarried from Phnom Kulen, a plateau roughly 40 kilometers to the northeast. It was transported, and this is where engineering meets sheer human will, by canal and river, floated on rafts or barges to the construction site. Each block was cut, shaped, transported, and then fitted into place without mortar. The joints are so precise that in many places you cannot slide a razor blade between the blocks, even after 9 centuries of tropical heat and monsoon rain. Our mason arrived at the workshops as Angkor Wat was entering its middle phase of construction, perhaps around 1130. The outer galleries were taking shape. The bas-reliefs were being planned. The workforce was enormous. Modern estimates range from tens of thousands to perhaps 300,000 laborers over the project's roughly 35-year construction period. There were quarry workers, transporters, foundation layers, masons who shaped structural blocks, masons who carved decorative elements, and at the top of the artistic hierarchy, the sculptors who rendered the bas-relief narratives and the devata, the standing female figures, over 1,800 of them, each unique, each with a different hairstyle, different jewelry, different expression that line the walls and corridors of the temple. Our mason carved devata. This was not simple work. Each figure is roughly life-sized, carved in low relief directly into the sandstone wall blocks after they were set in place. The carvers worked from scaffolding, using iron chisels and stone hammers, translating designs that had been sketched or incised by master artists onto the prepared surface. The level of detail is extraordinary. Individual strands of hair, the texture of silk garments, the weight of gold earrings pulling on earlobes, the subtle asymmetry of a half-smile. He would have worked in teams. A master carver would rough out the figure. Specialists would handle different elements, one for the headdress, one for the jewelry, one for the floral borders. The division of labor was precise and hierarchical, like everything in the Khmer world. And he would have worked in heat. Angkor's average temperature hovers around 30 degrees Celsius. Humidity during the wet season approaches saturation. The sandstone itself absorbs and radiates heat. Working on scaffolding against a sun-facing wall in the Cambodian afternoon would have been physically brutal. But the work got done, block by block, figure by figure, gallery by gallery. And when you stand today in the southern gallery of Angkor Wat and look at the great bas-relief panel depicting the Battle of Kurukshetra from the Mahabharata, warriors in chariots, war elephants with raised trunks, soldiers falling with arrows in their chests, commanders gesturing from beneath parasols, when you stand before this wall and realize that every single figure, every arrow, every leaf on every tree, every scale on every piece of armor was carved by hand by someone standing on scaffolding in 35-degree heat, using hand tools, working hour after hour after hour. When you realize that this single panel is 49 meters long,
Then you begin to understand what the Khmer Empire actually was. It was not just a kingdom, it was a machine for converting rice into labor, and labor into stone, and stone into the divine. But every machine needs fuel, and the fuel of the Khmer machine was water. Let us go deeper into the hydraulic system, because without understanding it, nothing about Angkor makes sense. The Angkor Plain sits between the Kulin Hills to the north and the Tonle Sap Lake to the south. The terrain slopes gently, very gently, perhaps 1 meter per kilometer from north to south. Monsoon rain falls heavily from May to October, then virtually stops. The challenge is simple to state and devilishly difficult to solve. How do you capture enough water during the wet season to sustain intensive rice agriculture during the dry season across a landscape that is simultaneously prone to flooding and drought? The Khmer answer evolved over centuries. The earliest capitals, Hariharalaya, near the modern town of Roluwas, established in the late 9th century, already featured berets and temple mountains. King Indravarman I built the Indra Tataka, the first major beret at Angkor, around 877. His son, Yashovarman I, moved the capital north and built the East Beret, the massive reservoir that would anchor the hydraulic system for centuries. The system worked like this. Water from the Siem Reap River and from monsoon runoff was channeled into the berets through inlet canals. The berets stored the water during the wet season. During the dry season, water was released through outlet channels into a network of smaller canals and distribution channels that fed the rice paddies downstream. The entire system operated by gravity. No pumps, no mechanical devices, just a profound understanding of gradient, flow, and volume. But the system was not static. Each new king expanded it. New canals were dug, new reservoirs were added. The West Beret, built under Suryavarman I in the early 11th century, was the largest artificial body of water in the pre-modern world. Jayavarman VII in the late 12th century added the Jayatataka Beret in the northeast and an elaborate new canal network. And here is where the story turns.
Because a hydraulic system of this scale and complexity is not just an engineering achievement, it is a commitment. It requires constant maintenance. Canals silt up, dikes erode, inlet channels shift as rivers change course. The labor required to maintain the system, dredging, repairing, rebuilding, was enormous, year after year, generation after generation. As long as the center held, as long as the king could command the labor, as long as the rice surplus funded the temples, and the temples organized the labor, and the labor maintained the water system that produced the rice, the cycle sustained itself. But what if something disrupted the cycle? What if the rains changed? Our mason did not think about climate. Nobody in the 12th century thought about climate in the way we understand it. But he would have noticed things. He would have noticed, perhaps in his 30s, perhaps in the 1140s, that the rainy season was unpredictable. Some years the monsoon came late. Some years it was weak. Some years it came with a violence that overwhelmed the canals and flooded the paddies with muddy, silty water that killed the young rice shoots. He would have noticed because the food rations changed. When the harvest was poor, everyone felt it, including the temple workforce. The Khmer inscription, and when the numbers stopped working, when the rice did not come in the expected quantities, the temples could not function, the labor could not be mobilized, the canals could not be maintained, and the next year's harvest was even worse.